Welcome to Living Room Conclave. We are discussing a very critical issue for India, a very important issue for India under our special series, India Financial Series. And today's topic, on which we have a very special speaker with us, Mr. Ari Sarker, President Asia Pacific at Mastercard. We are going to discuss a very important issue with him, bolstering India's digital payments ecosystem with him. Sir, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Times Network on Living Room Conclave. I mean, though we are in studio, but as the name suggests, the idea of this series and the idea of this initiative is to answer some very critical and basic questions and also enlighten people about issues which matter for India while they are in their living room. Obviously, we have a very interesting topic today, but I have a very basic question to start with, Ari, and that is, in the global scheme of things, and obviously Mastercard has a global footprint. It's one of the most well-known brands globally, and India has seen tremendous growth when it comes to the digital payments, the financial ecosystem, and the overall economic growth also. So, in your global scheme of things, where does India fit in?
Mihir, firstly, delighted to be here, and I was really looking forward to having this session. Firstly, I think let's talk a little bit about India. What's not to like about India? This is a 1.3 billion population. The economy is on a move.
Is that the Indian citizen? Indian in you speaking, or is that the
no? Actually, this is
President Asia Pac speaking?
This is both, if I may say that. And we believe the India story is one which is a very long-term secular growth story for most companies, and payments is just one element to it. And let me tell you what really drives our enthusiasm and passion for India, right? Massive economy, still going through what I call the emerging markets, development stage. If you look at any statistics, you pick from any economist or others, the range will vary, but what is very clear that in the coming 10 years, this could well be a $10 trillion economy.
Absolutely.
And if you think about...
We better be, actually.
We better be, exactly, yeah. And, just for the sake of, creating jobs and everything else. So that's a very sizable play. And if I look at the last, I'd say, decade, the investments that India has made on a number of fronts, and I know sometimes these things are not visible on a day-to-day basis.
That's true.
But very significant, what I call hard infrastructure investments that are going in, which cannot undermine even the digital economy, right? You need the airports, you need the roads, you need the ports. Hard infrastructure coupled with what we call digital infrastructure. And I think India's investments and the growth of what we call the financial inclusion program, the Jan Dhan program, together with the Aadhaar infrastructure of
the
digital
JAM
ID, the JAM trilogy has been spoken of, is a really powerful enabler with the growth of what we call digital payments and services. UPI has seen some phenomenal growth, right? You've seen, I believe the latest statistics even from last month is about 6 billion transactions in a month.
Correct.
And at an overall level annually last year, I think UPI touched about $1 trillion of volume. Now, if I'm looking ahead over the next 10 years, a 10 trillion economy in the Mastercard sense of what constitutes volume of what we call economic activity and therefore payment volumes, it's anywhere 5 to 6 times your GDP. So if you think about that, we are talking about a 50 to 60 trillion dollars of flows that will need digitization. And I think that is the excitement, opportunity around it. And I just feel that I'll talk a little bit about the near term, I won't call it challenges, but necessarily the opportunities that still remain. I think tremendous work has happened on financial inclusion, right? If you look at over 1 billion bank accounts, you've got $80 billion of government direct benefit transfers hitting those bank accounts, which I believe is over 200 to 250 million people are getting the direct disbursements. I think all that is great progress, but I think the next coming decade will need the shift from what I call inclusion to inclusive growth. So how do you make this, phenomenal foundational development to power up inclusive growth? And our view is that if this is done well, and I know the government believes exactly the same thing, and some of their recent innovations that they are moving with, whether you call it the ONDC capability or OCIN that is coming out in development, ONDC, the Open Network for Digital Commerce, and OCIN being the Open Credit Enablement Network. I think these are all in that direction, where if you start to plug the credit access gap in micro businesses and small businesses, and also what I call the Vishwakarma sector, which is the the gig economy. The global term is gig economy.
Correct.
I think you can clearly unlock 200 basis points or 2 percentage points of growth for the economy.
Are you serious?
So that is very significant, and it's not easy.
On top of such a large base.
On top of this large base, on top of the 8.2% that India is slated to do. So imagine if the 8.2 breaches double digit. I think that is the real opportunity for the country, and therefore businesses like us would like to play a small role in that overall growth story. Our mantra is, if India wins, we win, and I think that is what we lead with.
Right. No, that's a very interesting concept, and in fact, I like the word power up that you just mentioned. If you want to elaborate about that, because after that I want to get into specifics and talk about certain critical issues from that point of view.
Correct. So I think, Mihir, if you look at where the environment for digital is now creating what I call, it is absolutely taking barriers down. If you look at how businesses developed and grew from the 50s and 60s, that model, and 70s, 80s, that model is completely challenged in the last 10 years.
Absolutely.
Close to about 100 unicorns. So what this is really telling you is one has to continue to collaborate and partner in order to win in any market. And I think technology is democratizing market access in such a way that has never happened before. So I think the way we look at this is, we're good at doing certain things. There'll be others who will be good at doing certain things, and how do you create that enabling network effect of like-minded businesses, enterprise, entrepreneurs working together, collaborating together, and creating what we call outsized benefits, both from and we're a capitalist society, and we should reward innovation and success both from individual gains, but I think most importantly, I think the benefit to broader society that one can create by this incremental capability, I think will be transformative. I will talk a little bit as we speak, Mihir, of some projects that we are undertaking at some state government levels, and we are seeing some phenomenal, what I call green shoots of what structural change can do to accelerate growth in our economy.
Right. Ari, I have a question. See, I mean, we have already seen that India has one of the fastest growing digital economy, I would say, right? Now, obviously, this cannot happen or this cannot sustain unless you have an equally solid, I would say, cybersecurity framework and the cyber laws. Are they in sync?
So I think, Mihir, this is going to be a journey. My view is that everybody is learning. I think governments are learning, security agencies are learning, but I think what is very clear is you've got to be able to create a cyber environment where you have to accept the fact that you're only as good as your weakest link. And what do I mean by that? If you talk of what I just said earlier, that this is a network collaboration environment. If 20 companies are connected digitally on a network, and one of them is working with very poor cybersecurity capability, then everybody is equally vulnerable. And therefore, to have the right standards, to have the right protocols, to have the ability to make sure that you've got the right authentication, the right identity, the right, what I call technology, what are interfaces, all this is a very significant play for not only an opportunity for Indian businesses who are innovating and the fintechs who are innovating, but even for large corporations like ours. We feel that there is a natural symbiotic relationship between us and the larger community as we help build a more secure cyber environment. And there, if I may just talk about the benefit of where the new age of where cybersecurity is going, I can lumber you with 10 passwords and 20 pins and all kinds of steps in between, but that's all friction in your life.
Correct.
You don't want friction.
Correct.
You and the consumers really want that. The consumers want, give me protection like I've never had before,
along with ease of
but
transaction.
Do not come in the way of my life.
Correct. That's
now
true.
A lot of this magic is going to go into the background, and that magic is very significant. It's here. It's not. I'm not talking about the future. Some of the authentication capabilities, where the way you hold your device, the way you type on that screen, the errors you make, whether are you fat finger, are you using your index finger or your thumb, all that can be tracked through technology and be able to create a very unique impression of you and therefore not easily mimicked by anybody else. So therefore, there's artificial intelligence and other capabilities that drive that very secure operating environment. And I do want to comment that the Reserve Bank of India is leading from the front on this one. You would have seen announcements around tokenization, and I think tokenization is going to be a massive enabler for more secure payment transactions. Consumers are going to benefit, businesses are going to benefit. The onus on businesses prior to tokenization was that if you stored your card on Make My Trip, then Make My Trip has to ensure that they protect those credentials. But with tokenization, your payment credentials are actually stored in a token vault, and Make My Trip is only holding an authenticated token. And God forbid, if any of them get compromised, outside of that environment, it actually means nothing. I think that's the security that the industry is moving towards.
We can safely say that to some extent RBI is ahead of the curve when it comes to tokenization or initiatives like this. In a globally integrated financial services system, do you think that the global markets also can learn few things from what India is currently trying to do, or develop an ecosystem in terms of which is secured but digital?
I completely agree here. I think we talked about UPI and other such capabilities. I think India is certainly doing a lot of innovation that many markets can learn from. And they are. And trust me that many countries are looking at what India is building, the capability India is bringing. India is also, like we talked about ONDC, we talked about OKIN. These are actually very big, what I call structural shifts that India can make. And I think it's not just an emerging market play, but could be equally relevant to many developed markets where some of these challenges exist. It's not just, I hate saying it, some of these challenges are not just what I call the second world problems, but these are also first world problems that one is dealing with.
You have an interesting trial which is going on in Brazil, Smile to Pay. I don't know how many people actually smile while paying, at least I don't, but if it's successful, it's expected to roll out in Middle East and Asia as well. So how are you ensuring that while you are creating a sort of ease of transactions for a customer like me, you are ensuring safety? Because it's end of the day, it's biometrics. So, so how does it work?
So I think, Meher, on a lighter note, I think Smile to Pay will hopefully have happier people around us, right? So it should actually help society at a broader way. But on a more serious note, I think what you're going to see is that this is part of that, my earlier comment on that where do you take identity and authentication to, where the science goes into the background and the consumer or business just gets about doing what they need to do in a seamless manner. So I think I can assure you that these are built on very, what I call, EMV global standards of payment technology, and therefore the encryption of these biometrics and everything that gets stored, some of this is device-led today, and therefore, we have a service here which RBI has blessed it. It's called Identity Check Express, which in essence what it does through the mobile device, it uses your current thumb or facial recognition on your device to allow you to experience, just as you have contactless on card, on a mobile device-led payment experience, you won't need a second factor authentication, because the second factor, which is the OTP that we receive, will be suppressed in the background because the authentication of your biometric will determine has already happened, right? So I think Brazil is just another example of what Smile to Pay will do. My view is that you'll see variants of this, but I can assure you that these are built on absolute global technology stacks and standards.
I'm sure.
And the point I was making earlier that you're only as good as your weakest link. Everybody needs to work with those standards and capabilities to ensure that the environment is very secure.
Right. But Ari, I'm slightly curious, I'll tell you why. Because we discussed about Jam Trinity and how it is playing out, and obviously we have created one of the most advanced, I would say, financial services ecosystem globally. We saw that during pandemic also, how easily India could transfer benefits directly into somebody's account compared to US, which was still issuing checks. My question is, we have a very divided, I would say, financial services ecosystem or the banking system. So while you still have some people who are migrating from being completely detached and maybe underbanked or non-banked,
Yes.
they are getting into banking system, and you already have top of the pyramid which has already moved to the global standards
Yes.
in terms of digital ecosystem.
Yes.
Now, how do you bridge the gap between these two? Because at some point they all will have to converge,
Now, Mihir, that's a great question. As I was talking about the journey that India has had in the last decade, and I talked about this notion, this concept of moving from inclusion to inclusive growth.
Yeah.
And that is precisely going to be the opportunity. I'd like to use the word opportunity as opposed to challenge.
Okay.
And the opportunity is, if you look at the micro SME and the small business or the Vishwakarma sector, which is a very large part of our economy, where a lot of the employment is generated, and I think India needs to create many more millions of jobs every year.
Right.
But the biggest constraint is the largest employment base is really the small and medium enterprise sector, is the sector that is most constrained by inability to grow because of lack of access to credit. And many of them are probably in the informal sector as well.
Correct.
So I think the opportunity is where a lot of the foundational capabilities have been fantastically executed. And now you really need to take this and say, how do I bring what we call flow-based lending to small ticket, short tenor financing to large parts of the economy, which today is credit starved. And if we solve that conundrum, and therefore massive amounts of data science will have to work in the background, where small businesses can get 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 rupee loans on very short tickets to get working capital financing. Lack of working capital is a massive, what I call, to the detriment of any type of growth for small business. So I think you really have to power that. So I'm pretty, I feel confident that as India embarks on this journey, and I feel that's also an opportunity for many of us, and we can partner with many stakeholders in the Indian ecosystem to be able to bring a lot of the science around data, the science around what we call flow-based lending, and that should be able to open up very significant opportunities. If I may, Mihir, just talk a little bit about,
Sure.
We're doing a pilot project in Andhra Pradesh actually, and this is, we have tried to digitize farmers onto this platform.
Okay.
And this enables farmers with farmers producers organizations and the buyers of farmers produce. And we've got about 300,000 farmers onboarded. We have about 100,000 farmers who are active on the platform.
Okay.
And the intention really was that whether the farmer buys input variables to produce and then finally sell the produce, can all ride on this Farm Pass platform. And therefore, over a period of time, you are going to create the ability to score farmers and their ability to know how much, what we call, income do they generate from what they're selling, and the collateral benefit of what we are seeing, and these are very early days of the pilot,
Right.
there's appreciable increase in price realization that the farmers are seeing.
Right. See, I mean, obviously SMEs and MSMEs, they matter for India's overall growth also.
Yes.
I mean, the kind of contribution that they bring on the table in terms of, the sheer contribution to GDP, exports, manufacturing. Are there some roadblocks which we need to address for their even further smoother integration into digital ecosystem?
I think there are roadblocks. I think that the GST has kind of worked its way through. I think people have started to understand, because there were execution challenges in the initial stages. But I really feel that the roadblocks are less about policy, but more opportunities to innovate, if you think about it. If you've got some things in the structure which is broken, there is an opportunity for private enterprise, somebody to come innovate to solve a problem.
Okay.
And I think you're going to find that happening in a very significant way, where I'll tell you, if you're a small business today, and it's already happening, earlier, if you wanted to set up an accounts payable, accounts receivable, or a payroll system or what have you, this was the prerogative of large companies that you needed to go to Oracle, you needed to go to these big software vendors. These days, you've got microservices, application-led capabilities, which small businesses can start digitizing and get the benefits of what large corporations have enjoyed, and therefore be able to drive much greater success. And the ease of doing business is something that is now getting democratized, and you don't need to have armies of large infrastructure. A small business can benefit, equally, is the direction of journey I feel India is on.
Right. Now, you obviously have a very deep-rooted relationship with this sector. How are you as a company enabling these organizations and merchants to maybe assess and also manage the threats in terms of cybersecurity or safety of payments, and also, I mean, including how they can maybe secure their supply chains or third-party vendors and all of that. How does that work?
So Mihir, it's a great question, and 9/10 of the challenge is actually just having awareness. And if you look at our partnership with the Confederation of All India Traders, now it's almost 10 years that we are working with them. And this was not done with Mastercard as the focus point. It was done with a pure, let's call it, let's build a broader ecosystem, ethos, where we were educating CAIT members, and they have like 65 million members. And we were doing, I think we've done some 200 odd sessions across India. And each of these sessions were attended by 500-600 of their traders on the power of formalization, the digitization of trade. And India has unfortunately been in the old world of thinking that if I formalize, I'll have to pay tax.
Pay tax.
So if I stay below the radar, I don't need to pay tax. Now GST has kind of brought that to the forefront, and everybody is being forced to digitize, because the benefits of GST with the input, the output offset, that GST has delivered. Now, what you're going to find is that there is an increasing realization of the next gen, and this is very interesting. If the father runs the shop or store today, as the next gen is rising, they all want to take international standards. They all want to, what we call, innovate and therefore try new things. I think that's a really positive thing. We're not going to be held hostage by our past practices, but we are moving forward with thinking of trying to reinvent and doing things differently. So I feel that's a really positive thing, and you're going to see continued success coming out from it.
Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. It was very interesting, and in fact, for our viewers, going forward also, we will have very interesting conversations under this series, Living Room Conclave India Financial Series. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ari.
Thank you, Mihir. Appreciate it. Thank you.